we have Michael, pronouns he, him, in California, wants to talk a little bit about abortion today. Michael, how are you? You were on with student Dr. Ben and Secular Rarity.
Yeah, I'm a person who believes in zero population growth. And I think that there's an issue that people don't talk about, and I think it's just as much Margaret as choice is. And I think what the problem is, and that comes down to population growth in itself. Just imagine this. Imagine that abortion wasn't illegal. And the population that we'd have today, we would be having problems with food shortage, security, wars. Just it would be out of control. And I mean, just imagine the population. And my question is, what do you think about population growth, zero population growth, and what's important, and what do you think is important about it?
Yeah, that was something that kind of jumped out at me right away, Michael. So I don't know that zero population growth is ever actually even attainable, right? Because people are always having children, and people are like dying. So it seems to me like we're always going to have at least a slight up and down on that. Although obviously the long-term trend over the last, 100 or so years has clearly been going up steadily. This is one of those things that's really, really nuanced, I think. And in the past, there have been some very famous individuals that have done all types of calculations and hypotheses and whatever big words need to be inserted here, where they've talked about that there is like this kind of upper level for human population across the world, and like we're really close to it, or we're about to achieve it, or we already have, or whatever it is. I don't know exactly what that number is. I don't know if it's 9.5 billion people on the earth is too much. I don't know if it's 55 billion. I don't know if it's 3 billion. I don't know where that number really resides. I think oftentimes when we talk about too many people on the earth, one of the biggest things that we're talking about is the negative consequences that happen to all of the other people that are also here already, right? Like we know that if we just continue to expand consumption of a lot of different things, whether it's, plastics or chemicals or, meat products and so forth, like there's a lot of different things that we know if we scale that up, the ramifications are bad. For instance, concrete, there is a surprising amount of pollution that comes from making concrete. And the more people that we have, the more buildings that we need and places to put people and roads and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you can just see that kind of adding on together. I think we could probably minimize any problems that are related to simply the amount of people, by just doing a better job of caring about that stuff. Obviously we're going to have waste if people are around, but maybe we just stop building communities for mainly minority individuals and putting them right next to large dumps and waste facilities and so forth, right? So we don't have to do stuff like that. We choose to do stuff like that. And more people on the earth isn't going to make that a necessity so much as it's going to be necessary for us to pay more attention to those consequences. I hope that kind of, got somewhere there, but let me throw it over to Ben real quick and see what he thinks about more people on the earth. And then we'll come right back to you, Michael.
So I'm very curious about this because this, like SR said, this is a very nuanced discussion. So let me just real quick, I don't want to straw man where you're going with this. Would you say this is an issue related to if we reach a threshold of the maximum amount of people that can survive with the resources that we have, versus, finding ways to keep the population low so we don't reach that? Is that kind of what I'm gathering you're going for?
Yes, that's true. For example, when let's take theists. They're basically large families, and they have to feed those families themselves. But do they understand that? I don't think so. And I think there are so many problems that people don't understand because of population growth. And those answers have to be. We have to find those answers. If we don't, there's going to be a big problem, because if they don't allow a woman to have choice, then we're really, really in problems. And there's going to be, there's so many problems extending from that just itself, the problem. And it's mind-boggling. And I sit back and I'm thinking, well, we got 40, 50 years with the right to have an abortion. Well, if we never had that, the population of just the United States alone would be outrageous. It would be out of control.
Well, I want to kind of have a dialogue with you here about this. I know we had a great conversation just now with kind of the abstract. Is this moral to strive for this zero population growth? But let's bring this logistically real quick. So if we have if zero population growth, so no addition and no subtraction from this number, if we're striving for this ideal number, how would we do that?
Yeah, that definitely came to my mind too. I don't know exactly what the procedure would be, right?
We would have to. I think we'd have to show the people, and look at this. Look at. We have food shortages. We have too much traffic. We had. The families can't afford to have these families. It's education.
So besides education, think about this. If we're going for zero population growth, just is the goal to have people stop, procreating? Are we taking sex off the table? What measures are we taking to prevent these births from happening?
And in
such specific numbers.
And just real quick to kind of add on with that, Michael, I know Ben can speak more to this, but how many times has somebody come in to the doctor's office, been pregnant, got an ultrasound, and the doctor goes, "Hey, so remember how we told you were having a single kid? You've got twins or you've got triplets or whatever," right? These kind of random occurrences are always just going to be there. These anomalies that we're not paying attention to. And let's say we get to the place where we're hardcore restricting, the amount of children that can be born every year to maintain this zero population growth. What are we going to do in those instances? Because they will appear. They absolutely will come up.
Well, I think what's going to happen is when they sitting at the table for breakfast or lunch or dinner, they're going to look at their table and see, wait a minute, there's not enough food on this table to feed all of us, and these points have to be made and understand, because if we don't, there's going to be a serious problem. There's not a problem right now because we're just getting back into a problem with growth. Well, we have a problem with growth, but it's going to be worse. And in time, generations down the line are going to have serious problems. And
Michael, let me jump in for a second, because I think we're just going off a path that isn't necessary. I think what Ben and I are kind of focusing on is a little bit more specific than that. I don't want to speak for Ben, but I do know the fella at least decently. We have talked a couple of times, and I feel like Ben would be not for children not having enough food, right? I think all three of us here on the call can agree that those are negative consequences and we don't want that. But if you're saying that the way to fix that is through zero population growth, what exactly would we do to minimize that? I mean, I agree. Let's try and educate people and have civil discussions and push back and challenge each other on all the things out there that are going to bring harmful stuff, which is why I love coming on here and talking about, faith and God and science and stuff. I think when we don't have good methods to getting to conclusions, we have worse conclusions. Like we just have bad outcomes. And that's, I think, kind of where Ben and I are focusing on, which is like, yeah, we all three agree that a lot of these outcomes you're talking about are really bad. But the question is, how exactly would we achieve that by focusing on completely zero population growth? How does that method get us away from these bad conclusions? Does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't, because there's too many people on the planet right as of today. But then, you know, those problems, if we keep increasing populations, that problem is going to get worse. And that that's going to affect generations down the line. It's going to be serious problems.
Yeah, but what policy would you put in place to cause this to go down?
I would try to start with responsible policies. Getting people to learn and understand, you know, why we need to control population. And
okay, so education is great. We've established that, but what else do we need to do? I'm not convinced that education is enough for people. Especially, you have people who are growing up in the society, and many of them have been taught that it is your duty to bring children to this world. They feel that their value to society is to have children. So not only I agree you have to approach it culturally and from education, but you'd have to have some pretty strict policy to tell this person, hey, I know you really wanted to have kids, but you can't anymore. And this is the law that we're going to set in place so that, are we limiting the amount of children? Are we, how are we going to achieve this zero population growth? Because even among that, SR was saying that having twins kind of throws a wrench in this plan. But if, like, even we have some risk of subtracting from the population. You have pregnancies that, like, let's say you planned, like, only certain people get to be pregnant and have kids. We have some of them that won't make it, that will have lethal mutations that will not allow them to survive. So how would we dial it in to achieve this very specific number for a population?
We're just going to have to find reasons to make them understand. I mean, I understand everything you're saying is correct. I agree with that. But the point is that the question has to be answered, and if it's not answered, there's going to be a lot of problems. And I think I think the problem can catch up to people, and let's hope that. I mean, I actually think that I hope that happens, because people were sitting back and they'll be saying, you know, my God, you know, look at the food prices today, because it's demand there. There's demand for foods instead of in California here, a gas tank costing $5 of gas, and it's going to go up to $10, $15 a gas for gas.
Michael,
those are real answers.
Michael, let me try maybe and refocus just a little, because it sounds to me like one of the biggest problems is not actually the amount of people for you, but the problems are the negative ramifications that more people will most likely put on the system that we have currently. Like if there's only 5 people trying to buy toilet paper at my local store, then I'm probably going to have enough to buy, you know, an extra pack. But if there's 500 people there, I may not even get the first pack. If we were able to minimize all of those supply chain shortages and, have adequate housing, adequate education, and so forth, if we were just able to kind of get rid of those negative consequences, but still increase the population, would that be an answer that works for you? Is that something that you would be okay with? Or is there something specifically about 10 billion plus people that you're just like, no, we can't ever do that? That's not okay.
Yeah, I don't think we can allow that to happen. I mean,
so it is specifically about the number of people as opposed to the consequences that the majority of people will
consequences
experience.
are always going to be there. The consequences are always going to be there. I mean,
so I don't think so, Michael, because we have radically changed in the last 200 years, in the last 100 years, in the last 50 years when it comes to production and scale. And the ability for an individual to plow a field these days is just totally different than it was 200 years ago, right? And so we actually are at a production level that is insanely good right now in a lot of different places, but there's always more that can be done, especially if we really want to focus on minimizing the harm that exists in this world to people. I think it's absurd that we throw away like half of our food supply, our produce, before it even gets to stores in the United States. We grow a whole freaking field of crops, and we like throw half of it away and then send the other half to stores where like a third of that gets thrown away. It's nonsense to me. I agree, but it seems like if we were able to fix all those problems, and minimize all these negative consequences, that you still aren't exactly comfortable with that. And I guess kind of what I'm wondering is, why specifically does the number of people matter? If we can minimize all of those bad things you're talking about, then who cares if we have 1 billion, 20 billion, 100 billion, because we've given everybody adequate food and housing, right?
But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, when you're hungry, you're going to go to the store, instead of buying it, you're going to steal it. And I don't see a problem with that. But if that's the way it is. So the idea is here's the thought. What about urban farming? Teach people how to grow things in their backyard and things like those. Those are answers. And
so let me.
We move in a direction of education, then we're going to have some results. But we're not educating people about population. We're not doing that.
Yeah, Michael, I totally see where you're coming from, and we've talked about the education side of this. But here's the thing: like, I understand that you're very passionate about the education, and that's fantastic. My issue is, I do not see how realistically education alone could slow the population growth by that much. It's a big ask to reach zero population growth. And so the problem for me isn't the education aspect. It isn't the desire to have enough resources for everybody. And I think SR has a great approach to this of what if we could redistribute the food better? What if we could have better resources available? But my biggest problem with this whole argument is, if people decided we needed to limit our population this much, what are they going to do to get there? And I'm worried that we're heading into a eugenics scenario. Yeah. I'm worried that it's going to be a policy of who gets to have children and who doesn't. And then if you're only limited to a certain number of children, then what happens to people? Like, if, they're worried that their kid is going to be gay, or they're worried their kid's going to be trans, or some other issue, if they're worried that, their kid isn't going to, be a cis male, because we saw that. I think you brought up that issue a little bit before, but like, I'm worried that the ethical issues coming not out of the goal for the lack of population growth, but the means of achieving that. I think that's what scares me a little bit. And that's why I'm hesitant to jump on board, because I just don't see logistically how education could even get us close to the zero population growth.
And we have seen various policies put in place by various governments, all around the world. One of the most recent ones, that probably the majority of viewers will be familiar with is the one child policy in China that was put in place by their ruling government for years. I think it was like 20 some odd years. One of the very specific and odd kind of problems that came from this was there was a whole bunch of children that were born because, again, sometimes you just walk into the doctor's office and they're like, hey, you've got triplets. And it's like, oh gosh, I didn't do that. Like, I didn't plan for that. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't try for 2 extra people. I just wanted the one child. But under that policy, the way that it worked families literally had to hide those children to the point that they didn't receive birth certificates. They didn't receive any kind of identifying information that would mark them as a citizen or even a human being. They didn't get to go to school. They literally can't leave the house because if they get caught, they'll be arrested now. And these are 25, 26, 27-year-old adults. These are people that want to move on with their lives, and they are fundamentally barred from doing so because of a governmental policy that was specifically about population growth. And again, that's just one of many, many, many nuanced problems. There's a whole generation that is essentially missing and unable to do certain types of labor that is very needed. So I think we have a minimum threshold of people that we need on the earth. Like, we can't have all the cool people things if we only have two of us. Like, Ben and I are great, but I don't think either of us can make flat screen TVs. So that
Real questions here. The flat screen TVs
that's right.
are important.
That's right.
Yeah.
The screens are flat and just like the earth. But the point is, I think where both of us are coming from on this, Michael, is that when it comes to all of the problems that you are associating with this, we're very much not in favor of people not having food, people not having housing, people not having good solid education. But the method of telling others that they can't have more children is one that leads to so many other consequences that I'm just not sure it's really worth it. But Michael, we're gonna wrap up here. We'll give you just a quick 30 seconds to say what you like real quick, man, and then we'll move on and talk to some other really cool people. So thanks for calling.
Yeah, you have a lot of the answers. You're saying, what you're saying makes sense. But I think what's important is it is a problem. It needs to be solved. If it isn't solved, then in the future, not necessarily of the generation but in generations that are in front of us are going to have a big problem. And we have to take a look at those problems. If we don't, there's going to be hungry people, and there's going to be wars that are going to be worse. I'm a person of peace. I belong to a group called Veterans for Peace. I understand what war is all about. I'm a Vietnam veteran. And I want people to understand that, the future has to be looked at. And if we don't look at the future, then we have a big problem because it's going to be real bad, and hunger is going to be real bad. Anyway, thanks for the call. You guys are great. You're really, you're intelligent, and I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Yeah, Ben, I think you were hitting on a lot of really good stuff. I don't know how exactly we would achieve zero population growth. And again, I don't know that that's really what we should go for. It's like when you see that, like a house is on fire, right? You don't want to say like, oh, well, we got to make sure that this part of the cabinets aren't burned up because that's where I keep all my spices for cooking and I want to cook tomorrow. It's like, well, that's not really the issue right now. We got to put out the fire that's actually consuming the house. Like, I get it. You've got some really nice paintings you want to keep, but that doesn't, that's not going to help you survive as like the house will.